Well, hey everyone, you're watching Wired Up Retro, episode number 91, and today I've got some good news to share regarding the Atari Gamestation Pro emulator games, especially the Super Nintendo emulator as well as the Turbografx 16 emulator. When the firmware was updated from 1.20 to 1.30, they added these emulators on board the system so you could load in your own games with a little micro SD card. But there were some issues with some of the controller buttons. I go into that in a little bit, but ultimately there are a couple of controllers which are shining beacons of controller goodness that actually solve these issues. And I've created a chart that basically kind of goes over some controllers that work on the GSP. Now, as you can see here, I've got on the left side top tier controllers. They have some check marks on them. And then on the right side, I've got second tier controllers. The ones with check marks are the top of the line GSP controllers, which will work both in the front end menus and the games, while the ones that don't have a check mark will not work in the menus, but just in the games. I'm mainly focusing on the check mark gamepads today. You might be noticing that within the Xbox One category, there's a controller made by PDP that has earned 2 check marks, and also there are non-Xbox controllers that have remained a secret, which have also earned 2 check marks. Today I'm going to reveal these mystery controllers, and I'm going to show you what makes them special. And I'd like to show you among the 4 special controllers which one is my favorite. Before we get into that, I also want to touch on another topic that I'm going to be handling in this episode, which has to do with the controller adapter I'd shown on another Wired Up Retro made by Bliss-box that has had some extra special enhancements made to it recently. In fact, there's a couple of these Bliss-box controller adapters I'm going to be touching on today, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, let's just go ahead and get back to talking about the controllers that can get direct connected that work extra specially well. Now, I've got up on the screen here an Atari 5200 game of Defender I was playing in the last episode. And yeah, I was having a great time with the controllers. You know, any of those controllers in that big list I showed you can work with the Atari games that are on board this system. In fact, they'll work great with the NES games or Genesis games, Sega Master System games, Game Boy Color games. But yeah, it's just the Super NES and Turbografx 16 emulators on board that seem to have the controller issues with certain buttons. Now, before I do anything, I do want to mention that the GSP has a USB Type-C controller port on the front, a couple of them, so you're going to need one of these. This is just an example of one type of USB to USB Type-C adapters, and yeah, some people call them an OTG cable. Now let's fire up the GSP's Super Nintendo emulator and take a look at what happens when using a top-tier PS4 or 5 or Xbox One or Xbox Series X controller to play Super Mario Kart. In Mario Kart, if you're using a PS4 DualShock 4 controller, you can tap one of the shoulder buttons and you'll hop your kart, which is nice. But if you do collect a weapon, let's say a shell that you want to launch in front of you and knock one of your competitors out of the way, well, when you press the button that's supposed to do that, unfortunately it puts you into a Gamestation Pro menu that's really not supposed to be activated. And so you cannot launch that shell. Now, if you're playing it with the Xbox One controller, if you press the equivalent button, instead of triangle, you press Y, it actually does launch your shell in front of you, which is what you wanted, but it also activates that daggone Gamestation Pro menu. So then you have to press one of the other buttons to tap out of that menu and then proceed with the gaming. So any of these controllers are really not ideal to play a Super NES game. But one thing I did notice, which is kind of interesting, is that when using the Xbox One controller, if I were to be pressing that A button for gas, constantly holding it, and then tap that Y button, which is at the top of the controller, which does the launching of the shell, it actually doesn't pop up that menu. This is definitely something interesting that I want to point out. And this doesn't apply to the PlayStation 4 controller, and I presume PlayStation 5 controller. It just applies to the Xbox One or maybe Xbox Series X controller. Oh, and hey, look, I did it once again there. Holding those two buttons at the same time prevented the menu to be triggered. So that's, yeah, pretty interesting. I also want to show what happens when playing Turbografx 16 games on the Atari Gamestation Pro. So yeah, let's give sidearms a try, and I'm going to be pressing that A button to fire to the left, there, like that. Now if I want to fire to the right, I want to hit the Y button, but guess what? When I hit the Y button, it brings up this silly menu. So if I press, let's try the 2 buttons at the same time. Look at that. Now I'm able to shoot to the right. So I can overcome it by simultaneously pressing the Y button while holding down that A button. But yeah, it's a little bit of a hassle, but it is working. So I suppose that's one way to deal with it. Now at this point I want to introduce to you another alternate Xbox One controller. This is the PDP Rematch controller, and it has on the back, you can see these back buttons, and they can come in somewhat handy. I do want to mention to you that you don't really have to assign the back buttons of this controller to one of these particular buttons. You can actually leave them unassigned and it will still accomplish the task that we've set out to accomplish. Alright, so the button you want to be pressing and to access that simultaneous button press is that one right there. So right now I'm not pressing it, and oh, lo and behold I got a menu, but now I've got it pressed and I'm not getting that menu. So I'm able to shoot to the right. I can also shoot to the left. Let me show that. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, both sides accessed, which is nice. All right, yeah, this game, wow, it's a little tough, but having some fun. Okay, so I've got Mario Kart set up on my Super NES emulator, and I've got an interesting setup here, a little penny that's surrounded by tape that enables that button to be constantly pressed in. So I can always have the ability to launch a shell instead of having to press 2 buttons at once. Well, the button's gotten taped down. I'll show you how I did that. Take a look there. It can be done with a rubber band. That's pretty simple. And I can also do that with a piece of tape. That's the one I'm employing right now. So when I want to launch the shell, just go ahead and send it. And because I already have the button depressed, don't have to press 2 buttons at once with my, manually. Don't have to do it manually. All right, we're gonna have to launch that shell. Sorry, Princess Peach, but I've got to get in front of you. All right, let's get Donkey Kong. Hopefully they'll give me a shell. Yes. Sorry. Oh, Princess Peach. Revenge. Oh, man. All right, guys. So, yeah, it works well. All right, the time has come to now reveal the first of the mystery Atari GSP controllers. And what we have here is the mini wired gamepad made by Hori for the PlayStation 4. This controller basically is a very compact PlayStation 4 controller. It's kind of marketed as a controller you let your kids play with. It's got these molded back grips. You can notice it doesn't have any back buttons. But yeah, it's kind of reminding me of a Super NES controller in its compactness and the fact that it's got the D-pad far over there on the left side. This also kind of reminds me of another controller that I own, which is the Wii Classic controller. There are some definite differences, like where the cord is coming out, but also this shoulder button configuration is quite a bit different. But it does have the same thumbstick configuration and D-pad. I do think actually this D-pad is a little bouncier. It's got a little more of a tactile feel. This one doesn't click in quite as much, although it's, they're 80% the same. But anyway, just thought I'd show you that, those unique controllers. Now I've got the mini wired controller hooked up to my GSP, playing these Super Nintendo and Turbografx 16 emulators. And as you can see, I'm getting great control. There's no lag, and I definitely am able to get access to the buttons that need to be pressed without having to do simultaneous button pressing, which is wonderful. And so this controller has special capabilities. In fact, I think it's a little better than the Rematch controller because you don't have to press a back button to access the second button press. There's no need for that. So I think that's making this really ideal. All right, well, I'm really liking this Hori Mini controller, and it definitely is very compact. Some of you will like that aspect because it's basically a glorified Super Nintendo controller to play awesome Super NES and Turbografx 16 games. Fully compatible. It's a top-tier controller. It's got a nice D-pad, a nice thumbstick to play your games with, and I like these molded grips in the back. I definitely like that you can kind of grab it extra well with those. And it definitely works in the menus, and I really just find it an all-around very versatile controller. Now, before we move on to the next top-tier controller, which nobody has known about until today, I want to touch on that GSP compatibility chart that I had shown you. Just take a second look at it. Now, on the right side, I listed the second-tier controllers that work only in the games and not the menus of the GSP. I need to mention that all of these are going to have issues with the GSP's Super NES and Turbografx 16 emulator games. I won't go into exact specifics here, but there's info in the description below if you want to know more about that. Well, you guys probably noticed that I had Nintendo Switch controllers in the second tier controller list, and you know, when I initially was looking into whether these could work on the system, I found out they don't work in the menus, but they work in the games, and they played fine on Atari games, you know, games with one button or two buttons. They seem to work. But then when I got the Super NES emulator put on board and the Turbografx 16 emulator, these were having issues with button functionality. As you know, that's kind of a problem with the Switch controller. Since they're a second tier controller, it's just not going to work great. So I actually own another Nintendo Switch controller. I've had this for a while now. It's called the Horipad for the Switch. Somehow, some way, this is not just working in the games, but in the menus, which is, I didn't think Switch controllers could do that, but it does. And the buttons have proper functioning within the Super NES and Turbografx 16 emulators. And that's just as we experienced with the PS4 Hori Mini wired gamepad, so that's pretty neat. I want to do a quick review of this controller, so let me show that up a little bit closer. All right, so what we have here is the Horipad, and yeah, nice thumbsticks. I like that thumbstick, very nice. It's got your typical Switch shoulder buttons. On the back, you see this unique thing here. What is that for? Well, the D-pad is actually detachable, and if you detach it, you're left with these just standard up, down, left, and right buttons. You know, in certain Switch games, it might be nice to have buttons instead of a D-pad, so that's why they made this controller. So you can actually take the D-pad and attach it to the back and not lose it. So that's what that's all about. So one thing I did notice is that when playing the games with the D-pad, it's unfortunately just, it misses some of the diagonals, and I'm not really a big fan of the design, unfortunately. So I would recommend, if you're going to play with this controller, just to use those buttons instead of the D-pad. It's not so great. But yeah, the thumbstick works great, and this is a nice little Switch controller apart from that particular issue. Now, another thing, I was thinking, well, maybe I'd get one of these other Horipad controllers. This is the Horipad Turbo, thinking I kind of like that D-pad better than the other one, but I tried it and it didn't have the same advantages, unfortunately. This is not going to be great for the Super Nintendo emulator and the Turbografx 16 emulator. So anyway, this is the Switch controller that does do the job very, very well. All right. Okay, so yeah, the top tier double checkmark controllers really are working quite well, but there is something I haven't mentioned yet, and that is, let me set these down and I'll just hold this Hori Mini wired controller. for the PS4 up. Now, this has the buttons in a certain order. And if you were using, let's say back in the day, you were playing fighting games on your Super Nintendo, you'd maybe press this button to punch and this button to kick. But this controller setup for all of these isn't quite the same as the Super NES controller. So for those of you who have some muscle memory, this is going to be an issue. So anyways, not set up quite right for that type of game genre, and that would apply to Super Smash TV as well. So yeah, it's one aspect that's not exactly right, okay? So there is another controller, and this one is the Horipad FPS Plus. This is for the PS3 as well as the PS4. You can see that little switch can be moved, so you can change it from one system to the other. And it has some unique turbo functionality, which may add to the fun. And yeah, the thumbstick's all right, and the D-pad, hey, that's a great one. I like that. And it's even got this little target button on the back. And if I flip it around, you'll see on the middle part of the controller that it's got an assign button. That is a special button for our project. All right, well, I've got Williams Arcade's Greatest Hits up on my system right now, and we're going to be playing a little bit of Robotron 2084, and we'll go on down to that and get started here. Now, when it's not programmed, it's just going to have the buttons in the wrong position. So I'm going to show you how to program this so that they'll be in the exact right positions. Now, before we do anything, I want to show you how to zero out the controller. This basically clears the memory. All right, so I'm going to hold the assign button to erase this controller. 3 seconds, I held it. Now I'm going to hold the options button for about 5 seconds. And once that happens, then all those lights go out. So that means the controller did get zeroed out successfully. Now, I'm going to go ahead and program it. This is a 3-step process. Basically, a sequence of button presses is needed for each step. Okay, so to start out, press the assign button for 3 seconds. That light comes on. I'm going to press circle and triangle. All right, and now I'm going to press, this is step 2. Press the assign button for about 3 seconds. That light came on. Press triangle and X. And now we're on to step number 3. Press the assign button for about 3 seconds and press the X or cross button and 0. Now, it should be all set for playing some Robotron. Here we go. We'll give it a try. Up, down, right, left, and then we've got diagonals. Oh, get my girl saved. All right, yeah, works just fine. It's set up just right. And you can unplug the controller and plug it back in or turn the system off, and it retains that in its memory. So that will just stay in there the way it is. I also want to show you Total Carnage, which is kind of a similar setup. All right, Total Carnage is a game which not only uses these buttons for directional shooting, but also a mine laying button up there on the shoulder, okay? And that tends to work just fine. Everything's working as expected. I'll play a little bit of this just to show you how it's working. Now, the games Robotron and Total Carnage really are considered twin-stick shooters, and of course they've been adapted to be using a Super Nintendo controller with its buttons, but you know, they are similar to each other, but they also have some differences. You can see that the scrolling background is present here in Total Carnage, which you didn't have in Robotron 2084, which is kind of more of an arena-based combat shooter. And you know, Super Smash TV on the Super Nintendo is very much similar to Robotron in that it doesn't really have a scrolling arena-based combat. It's kind of more just relegated to a single room that you just rove around in. But here, yeah, right now you could consider this a room, but then you can end up leaving this room and going elsewhere. So it's pretty cool. Now here I have 4 screens that are showing various games. On the lower left I do have Super Smash TV being played, Super NES ROM. And to the right of that, and lower right, is Super Street Fighter II Turbo. Those buttons are in the right spot on that controller, thank goodness. And let's see here, we got Aladdin in the upper left-hand corner. I'm actually able to use the proper buttons in the proper place, including those shoulder buttons to use the parachute to float around. Up there on the upper right is a shooter called Final Soldier. It's a Turbografx 16 game. Tons of fun, no doubt about it. You know, something I've been wondering is really what's going on with all these Hori controllers working so well with these GSP emulators. I'm kind of wondering if maybe the people who implemented the Super Nintendo and Turbografx 16 emulators on board this GSP were using Hori controllers, or a Hori controller that happened to work, and when it was released as new firmware 1.30 with these emulators, they figured everybody's going to be happy. But yeah, unfortunately, those Hori controllers are very unique, so I'm guessing that's what happened, but who knows. Now, if you want to think about it, this is really good, but this might be better, maybe, okay? So for some of you who played on the Super NES controller or maybe a Turbografx 16 controller in the past, you might want to really enjoy your Atari Gamestation Pro with one of the originals. So you might consider getting an adapter that allows you to do that. And there are 2 Bliss-box adapters that I've made videos about, the GamerPro, or GP, and Wired Up Retro 84. This is no longer being made, but there's a new version of this adapter called the GP Junior. There's also, number 2, the GamerPro Advanced, which is the GPA. I showed that in Wired Up Retro number 86, which had to do with the Atari Gamestation Pro. And there's actually a new 4-port version of this adapter and that's come out recently called the 4Play Advanced. So you might want to check that out. So in today's presentation, we're first going to take a look at the method to get the Bliss-box GP working to play the GameStation Pro's Super NES and Turbografx 16 games. And after that, we're going to show you the method to get the GamerPro Advanced working with the bridge. Now, just a little side note, the GPA has to be combined with the Bliss-box bridge for the GSP's Super NES and Turbografx 16 games to properly work. So that may be something that some of you have not known before, but that is the case. Now, back on Wired Up Retro number 84, I did present this Bliss-box GamerPro adapter, and this basically, when you buy all these connector cables, enables you to, let's say for instance, take a Super NES controller connector and plug it in there, and you're going to be able to play games on whatever you plug this USB connector into. So in this case, you would plug it into the Gamestation Pro, and I've got a little method that can be used for the GamerPro. So this next section is basically taking an in-depth look at the GamerPro and GamerPro Junior. If you're interested in just gameplay and don't want to go into the details of getting things set up, then skip to the gameplay, and I've got the timestamp shown there for that. Now this is the GamerPro, which is the old version. They don't make this anymore. And this is the GamerPro Junior, which basically came shipped to me in 2 different packets. So let's go ahead and crack this open and see if I can put it together. So this little project probably will take maybe all of 10 minutes to complete. There is a recommendation about soldering some specific connections, so I will be doing that. You could try it without soldering. It's possible it'll work, but I'm going to solder it. So yeah, it looks as if you're going to attach it like this. Like that. Okay. So here you can see those 4 metal rods, and they actually poke through 4 different holes and get connection there, well, hopefully. Now, each of those rods at the tips have been pre-tinned. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the soldering iron, just heating up those rods, and those pre-tinned tips will hopefully get into those little holes a little bit better because of this heat up. And now I'm going to just apply a little solder to each and every hole. There's 4 of them there. And, hopefully it'll drip right down into the hole and get really good contact with each rod. So, the biggest danger is that you might short something out if you've got the solder in the wrong spots. So you just have to be really careful to have 4 separate individualized beads of solder on those 4 holes. Okay, so now what we're going to do is to put on the top and the bottom. So on top, you're going to want to have this, okay? On the bottom, you're going to want to ultimately have that label facing outward, okay? And that'll be held up by some very small little washers. So let's work on that side first. Now the GP Junior came with 4 screws that were a little long and 4 screws that were a little short. So I'm now using the extra long screws for this side, and the 4 that are short will be used on the other side. And you'll put these little extenders, these little tubes get connected to basically be used as the legs that connect the top plate to the bottom plate. Now let's skip ahead and attach the top plate. And now we'll take the shorter screws and put them on the top. It's probably best to get these started just with fingertips, and then you can get a screwdriver in. It's like Phillips head screwdriver. Tends to work really well. Like I said, this basically takes about 10 minutes to accomplish. Really not that big of a deal, and looks really nice in the end. Here on this side, you have the connector that looks like an HDMI port. That's where you connect your controller, and then next to that is the button, which kind of activates and also helps in programming. On the other side, you have the micro USB connector, which is what you use to get connected to your Gamestation Pro. So whether you have the GamerPro Junior or the actual Bliss-box GamerPro, either of these will work, okay? So now let's take a look at the software side of things. I've taken you to the bliss-box.net website, and we're going to click on Downloads. And once you're on that page, you're going to scroll just a little bit. There's a couple of firmwares you're going to get. This one is for PC. It's the one that's the standard firmware for the GamerPro. And also below there, you're going to get a Switch-based firmware. That's Nintendo Switch firmware. Each of these is a hex file. They're zipped, so you're going to have to use an unzipper and just put the file in a place where you know you kept it. All right, now we're scrolling down to actually get the Bliss-box software. Let's take a look at the API tool. This is it. You're going to click that. Again, that comes in zip format. You're going to need to unzip it and put it stash it away in a place that's convenient. And that is the BB Flasher, which is the newer version of the tool to actually load in firmware. So there you go. So that's basically what you're going to use on the software side. So once you've unzipped that software called the API tool, you're going to see it here. It says Bliss-box API.exe. And then you're going to plug your GamerPro or GP Junior into your computer. It's going to be a PC-based system here. It's probably best to be on Windows 10. All right, so I've opened up the API tool, and you want to make sure that D-pad UDLR is set to off, not on. You're going to go to the mapper, and you can see those numbers 1 through 8, first column, and that first column is the one we're dealing with. I'm getting the GP GSP SNES special mapping. Okay, so once I've gotten that, you can see right here I'm showing the first column, and those are the numbers that have to be assigned and mapped properly. Also, I have a second mapping which gets classic Atari, NES, Game Boy, and Genesis games working in the best way with controllers that have less than 4 buttons. In other words, like your Atari 7800 controller. So it's that left column you have to pay attention to, so there's your mapping right there. But for now, I'm just going to use the original mapping that I had shown initially. So yeah, you want to save to EEPROM and then press apply. And I don't think you really have to, but I usually click on Save Modes. There we go. And you can press the button on your GP or your GP Junior. When you do that, it says Update. You click that. You're going to find where you had put the firmware. I put it in Downloads. And there it is, that Switch 3005 firmware. That's the one I'm using right now. And there's the actual hex file. I clicked it, and it's now updating. And once that's done, you just click OK, and you can just close out that API tool. It may close easily, or it may actually say you're going to have to do a not responding window. But anyways, once it closes, you're good to go. Unplug it, plug it into your Atari Gamestation Pro. Now there's one little instruction I want you to follow here when you've got your controller of any type connected. You want to first tap a button and then hit the D-pad to direct your cursor. So if you try to hit the D-pad first, you might have an issue. So just keep that in mind. Now I've selected a Super Nintendo game, The Hunt for Red October, a movie-based game, to show off the Super Nintendo controller being used on the Gamestation Pro. So this is a game where it is kind of important that you want to have the configuration of the buttons set up properly. Like, I'll press the top button, X, and blow up that helicopter up above, and shooting to the right can be done, let's see here, by pressing the right button, which is A. And then you can, again, press up to fire up. If you press the very bottommost button, you're going to be kind of shooting in a downward position. So you get the idea. It's kind of like, you know, in a way like Total Carnage or Robotron, where you kind of want to have those buttons in the right spots. So yeah, and it's kind of fun. I think this is a cool little shooter that nobody knows about. You would think, you know, okay, it's a movie-based game, it's probably going to not be good, but I kind of like it. So I think you guys need to take a look at this and maybe check it out. Now let's try the game out with a similar controller made by Nintendo, the Wii Classic controller. Sometimes it's good to have some thumbsticks available, and this is actually similar to the PS4 Hori Mini Gamepad. So this would be one of many types of controllers you can plug into your Gamestation Pro. I kind of like the idea of using something that's like a Super Nintendo controller on Super Nintendo games, but you could even try, you know, like PlayStation controllers out, or maybe a GameCube controller or N64 controller. There's so many different controllers that can be used on this Gamestation Pro using these Bliss-box adapters. So it really is up to your imagination and how limitless that is in order to determine, okay, well, how am I going to play my games? I really like the Bliss-box products for that reason. And I'm not getting hardly any lag. I'd say it's imperceptible. So I think this is a fantastic way to play your Super NES games and all the other games on the GSP. So definitely I am recommending the product. There's no doubt about it. It's really wonderful. Now I'm plugging in my Turbografx 16 controller to play my Turbografx game, Sidearms Hyperdyne. So I did show this earlier in the episode, but I just wanted to give you the idea of, you know, how awesome it is to play a Turbografx game. It's a 2-button game. You know, you shoot to the right with the right button, and if you want to shoot to the left, you hit the left button. So they're in the right spots, and tends to work great. This is definitely a very nice controller. I recently picked this up thanks to my buddy Darren, who works over at Warp Zone. He owns the place, and he sold it to me for a nice deal. So thanks, Darren, for the controller. It's wonderful. So this is really a neat shooter. I definitely enjoy the fast pace of the game. Sometimes you'll get some really impressive weaponry, and you'll be blazing through this game. And you know, if you were really powered up, you're going to go far. But one thing you will notice is if you get taken out, you might be starting with a pea shooter, and it may take a while to build that back up, and you'll lose a few lives in the process. So this game is definitely a major challenge, and I have found that you have to just keep practicing and practicing. But man, it is fun. I really enjoy sidearms. A lot of fun. Now I'll show you a way to get Super NES twin-stick shooters into action utilizing the two thumbsticks of a PlayStation 2 controller. There are only certain PS2 controllers that have this special feature, so let's take a look at those. I do have a couple of Mad Catz controllers in the mix, and up there on the left is a Chinese DualShock knockoff. And here are the controllers I tried that really just didn't have that special feature, unfortunately. So there's a whole lot more of those than the ones that have the special feature. So let's get talking a little bit about that special feature just a little bit more. So I thought I'd explain just briefly what the deal is with these special PlayStation or PlayStation 2 controllers that have this special capability of using thumbsticks as opposed to just having a D-pad and buttons. So the special capability controllers, this one is a Thrustmaster. It's called the T-Mini Wireless. This particular one has a button that says analog. It just as a regular DualShock original PlayStation controller would have that button. And when you press it, it kind of lights up with a red light, and then you know you're in analog mode. But when you press it again, the light goes out. You know you're in digital mode. You know, the original PlayStation didn't have thumbsticks, and it was always in digital mode. You had a D-pad and the buttons, no thumbsticks. But when the DualShock original came out, it had the option you could select between digital and analog. And when you selected digital, just the D-pad and buttons worked, the thumbsticks went dead. But these third-party manufacturers of controllers in the end part of the PlayStation run and maybe even into the PlayStation 2 area, they were making the controllers not have these thumbsticks go dead, okay? So when you were in digital mode, you not only could use the D-pad and the buttons, but they enabled the left stick to mimic the D-pad and the right stick to mimic the buttons. So like triangle presses up, you get that, you know, a cross button presses down, and the square is left and circle right, okay? So you could actually play Super Nintendo twin-stick games with two sticks if you have the special kinds of controllers for the PS1 or 2. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, I will say that this all works with the GamerPro and GamerPro Junior. And it will also work with the GamerPro Advanced with one caveat. You have to have the bridge, the Bliss-box bridge has to be connected to the GPA in order for it to be utilized for all this on the Gamestation Pro. And that has to do with the Switch firmware, okay? Switch firmware can be loaded in the bridge, but it cannot be loaded in the GPA. The GPA is kind of an adapter that was specifically designed to be used with the bridge if you're going to use it on some systems. Now, I did get the GPA working with this on my other episode, but it just doesn't work with the Super Nintendo and Turbografx 16 emulators because, yeah, you have to have a Switch firmware in there. And you're probably like, why is it Switch? What's the deal? I mean, it's true, most Switch controllers are really not compatible with this and the Super Nintendo games. But that one Hori controller was a Switch controller, and it had compatibility, and it was a pretty nice deal. So I suspect that Sean, who runs Bliss-box, that company, he put in firmware into this that's Switch compatible, that it must be the same exact controller inputs and outputs that is happening with that Hori controller. So anyway, it's kind of cool. All right, so I will go through showing you the GPA and the bridge and how to set those up, getting the firmware installed on board so they'll work, and then we'll get into the gameplay. If you want to skip all that and you want to go straight to the gameplay, I'm showing a timestamp below, so you can definitely do that. And yeah, just be aware that the GPA and the bridge will work just like the GP Junior and GP Original, okay? And so that means that anything I show you from here on out in the video can be done with either option, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. All right, we'll go ahead and show you some of the setup for the GPA and the bridge. All right, start by going to the Bliss-box website, which is bliss-box.net. Click on Downloads, and we're going to scroll on past these and down to the GPA, or GamerPro Advanced. Firmware, 4.78 is the current one. Just grab as the current one while you're on the website. And you're going to download it, and it's going to be zipped, so you're going to want to I just right-click and I'll access 7-zip and just unzip it there. And store it in a place that you know you're going to keep it and know where it's at. All right. Now we're going to go on down to the bridge, and we're going to download the firmware for that, which you'll load in. So we're going to go and grab that. Oops. And actually, yeah, if you scroll a little bit further down, you can find the Switch firmware for the bridge. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and it'll load in, again, as a zip file. And I'm going to, take a look at it. We're going to right-click that and select 7-zip to unzip this. And again, you store it in a place on your laptop or computer where you'll know it's at. And once it's not zipped anymore, you have access to that firmware. All right, now let's get on back to where we were just at. And we are now going to scroll a little further down to the Bliss-box software. You're going to need the API tool. So click on that, download it. Again, it'll be a zip file. You'll want to unzip that. Put it in a place where you know where it's at. You'll also want to download the BB Flasher version 2.0. That's going to be used to load in your firmware to the bridge. Now, first, go ahead and plug in the GP Advanced to the laptop. And now I'm going to open up the API tool. And, yep, there's where I stashed it. I'm going to wait till it opens, and there it is. Okay, so when you see that pinkish orange color, you know that's the bar you're going to want to look at. And you'll hit Mapper, and you're going to select the mapping that you really want. So this mapping arranges the face buttons on the proper places on the controller so that the Super Nintendo and Turbografx 16 games will be able to work with controllers that have 4 or more buttons. For instance, Super Nintendo controllers, or a 2-button Turbografx 16 controller. Also, I have a second mapping which gets classic Atari, NES, Game Boy, and Genesis games working in the best way with controllers that have less than 4 buttons, for instance, a Genesis, NES, or Atari controller. So this is your second mapping option. And again, just pay attention to the first column on the left side. That's the one I made changes to. So that'll be a valuable mapping option for you on the GSP with a controller that has 3 buttons or less to play games that are 3 buttons or less. But for now, I'm just going to use the original mapping that I had shown initially. So yeah, you want to save to EEPROM and then press Apply. And I don't think you really have to, but I usually click on Save Modes. There we go. So now it's time to put the firmware in the GPA. So press its button and hold it in. And yeah, you press the Update button and find where you put your GPA hex file. And that is your firmware for the GPA. All right, you click on OK, it's all loaded in. Now, at this point, you just want to get out of the API tool. Just click on that to get out of the program. And yeah, you might get a not responding window. Just, get out of it. It's fine. You can unplug your GamerPro Advanced. And now we're going to go ahead and start working on the bridge. I've got that software, bbflasher.exe, right there. We had loaded it in to the computer. We'll go ahead and click that. And there it is. I'll bring it over to the middle. Now, I'm going to take the Bliss-box bridge and plug this into my computer. So I'll go ahead and plug her on in. All right, and you want to tap the button. A brief tap is all it takes. And once you do that, the update bridge symbol turns light green. So go ahead and press that button, and we're going to find the bridge firmware that I had downloaded, the one which says Switch on it. Scroll down a little bit. Aha, there we go. The Switch Wii U firmware can be just clicked on. You're going to go ahead and hit that hex file, and it will automatically erase and load in. And that is now on your bridge, which you can now unplug from your laptop and plug that in to your GSP. That'll go in first, and then GPA gets plugged into that. Alright, now time for some Super Smash TV with the Thrustmaster T-Mini wireless controller. Definitely having a whole lot of fun. This is a game of massive skill. You have to really line up your shots, you have to know how to avoid getting nailed by the enemy bullets, which there are a whole lot of in the later levels. So in fact, this next little level I'm entering, I'm definitely going to be challenged here. I actually own this on the original Nintendo, and it's a whole lot of fun to play on that system as well. But this just looks a little bit nicer. Definitely, oh wow, I just missed him. This is a whole lot more fun than I think a lot of other games. It just keeps you real busy, that's for sure. All right, next I'm going to be showing off a number of different games on the GSP, some of which I loaded in. There is a racing game that I'm going to show. It's called World Rally Championship by Galeco, and that one actually came loaded in your GSP. So here's the Grande Finale. That racing game's on the lower right corner. World Rally Championship, played with a PlayStation 2 Logic 3 top drive reactor, and I thought it really handled very, very well. So this Bliss-box offers a lot of different options. Now the game above World Rally Championship is Metal Slug, and that is a very nice game I loaded in. That's SNK Neo Geo. And then to the left of that is Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo, played with the Super NES controller. It's definitely bringing back some nice memories from long ago. And then below that, bottom left, I have Blazing Star, where I'm just shooting away. We've got a nice boss there. I'm going to completely dismantle and watch it blow up. So yeah, lots and lots of fun here to be had on the Gamestation Pro. Well, all right, my friends, the episode's coming to a close. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I sure had a whole lot of fun using special controllers on the Atari Gamestation Pro and showing you the ins and outs of getting this all accomplished and the subtleties of the Switch firmware. That was kind of interesting. So I hope you guys benefit from it. And if you don't own an Atari Gamestation Pro, I'm definitely a fan. So I would say definitely invest in one, especially if you're interested in putting the community firmware on board, loading in your own games and creating artwork that goes into the console. It's definitely a very versatile piece of equipment if you are into classic gaming from the 80s and maybe early 90s. So hopefully this will be a great benefit to you guys in the future. And this video kind of is a key that unlocked the system, which I think is awesome. All right, well, and we have future videos coming up having to do with classic gaming consoles, including in television, Atari 5200. I might do a little Super Nintendo video down the road, so we'll see what that's all about. So if you haven't subscribed, definitely give me a subscribe, give me a like, definitely leave a comment below, especially if you have questions, if you're like, I don't understand that one particular part about programming the firmware on board. I can definitely lend a hand and give you my view on how to fix those types of issues. So I'm here for you. All right, so yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and sign off. You guys have fun gaming out there, and enjoy your life. Take care.